Good morning, everybody. I have been talking about archetypes, I've been talking about spellcasters, I've been talking about lag. So let's dial it back a bit and talk about something that everybody likes, and that's vanguards, right? Like, I'm not the only one that likes vanguards. You guys love vanguards. Using your shield to attack stuff? Oh, you don't know about vanguards? Well, let me give you the details here. Vanguard is an enhancement tree that both Paladin and Fighter can use. Oddly enough, it's not like a shared tree, so if you have both Fighter levels and Paladin levels, it makes your Vanguard worse because you can't take the capstone in either tree. It would be cool if they could just share the tree, but whatever, it is what it is. But it's a tree where you have a shield, and you use that shield for offense. You see, Stalwart Defender and Sacred Defender are the tank trees in Fighter and Paladin. They're designed to give you lots of defense, and maybe a little bit of offense on the side, but mostly defense and health and armor class and physical resistance rating. But the Vanguard tree is a tree designed around one thing and one thing only: hitting people with your shield. The base mechanic is something called secondary shield bash chance. While normally you can just hold down the shift key and your character will start shield bashing when you click to attack, instead, this character, when you make a regular attack, has a chance to just get a free swing with the shield, basically like a combat bash. As a result, it's kind of like two-weapon fighting. You don't have to worry about when those attacks are going to be landing because they're already just landing for free. They don't interrupt your attack animation, so it's just damage. And on top of that, there are several attacks in the tree that also, similarly, don't affect your actual attack animations. It's like rune arms in a sense. So your character can be a fully functional fighter with your weapon attacks, but also be shield bashing for free on the side. And this has a lot of good benefits. First, because you have several good shield bashing attacks, your character gets a lot of burst damage, allowing you to combo 1-2-3 shield moves while also comboing your 1-2-3 sword moves at the same time, because again, they're basically on entirely separate attack systems. And two, because your character does have a shield, it is inherently more defensive, as shields provide not only physical and magical resistance rating, but they also mean you take less damage from anything that's effectively an area of effect ability. Anything that has a reflex saving throw, you get to double your physical and magical resistance rating against. So I personally love Vanguards. I love being able to use a sword and shield in a combat style video game without having to worry about only being relegated to the tank. It's something I find deeply frustrating in so many MMOs, is that if you have a sword and shield, your character is basically required to be the tank role in the party. If I'm playing World of Warcraft and I want to have a shield, well guess what? Warriors and Paladins are tanks. If I'm playing Final Fantasy XIV and I want to have a shield, guess what? Paladins are tanks. So in a lot of video games, not all of them, shields are relegated for pretty much tank exclusivity. And so Vanguard kind of flips that on its head. It's very, very offensively focused, granting you attack speed while you're using a shield, meaning you can get in more hits. So you don't get as much damage as a single weapon fighter, but you get a comparable amount of attack speed to a single weapon fighter while also picking up more double shot and double strike. But what you pick up even more than that is just the combat feel. Again, it's the sword and shield combat that you want from a traditional fighter, but actually dealing a ton of damage. And so that's what the Paladin is here for. Now, as far as the differentiation between Paladin and Fighter, that question is going to come up. With the Paladin, I think you get a little bit more area of effect, especially because you get both the Exalted Smite, which is a full frontal cleave, as well as your Tier 5 Knight of the Chalice ability that allows you to instantly kill any evil monsters in front of you, both of which are very, very powerful. Whereas I think with the Fighter, you kind of just get a little bit more direct single target damage because fighters get to pick up more melee and range power and more double strike with their character build. On top of that, fighters also get some cool executes where they get some great single target damage from the Kensai tree. And also, especially given the fact that you can now use Second Wind as a heal comparable to Lay on Hands. In fact, the heal is actually better when you get to endgame than Lay on Hands is. It's definitely a hard argument between which one is better, Fighter or Paladin, and I'm definitely leaning on probably Fighter being a little bit better when properly built, but Paladin does have a few advantages. First, this character is very easy to understand and play with because you get lots of healing through the leveling process, a lot of really good defensive buffs, and the cleaves are really easy to use. So this character just kind of starts right out of the gate with the Lay on Hands, disease immunity, and so many different effects. I think it's just an easier package overall than the Fighter would be. And second, I feel like it just thematically fits a little bit better, kind of like with the Paladin charging in like the Crusader, with the sword and shield, but still being like, you know, the sword of the silver flame, as it were. It just feels better to me to do the paladin more so than the fighter, but again, they're both pretty good. This character has a very easy leveling process because you get to have a shield on most of the time, so your armor class is going to be higher and you're going to take less damage from hits, while also being able to pump out some good damage during the leveling process. Now, you heard me say both Kensai and Knight of the Chalice and describe things as tier 5s. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated. You see, when you spend your points in Dungeons & Dragons Online, you can spend your points in multiple trees, but the tree that you spend the points at the top of, you can only do that once. That's called the tier 5. The top of each tree, you only get to pick one. And the Vanguard tree, while it's pretty good and has a lot of good stuff in it, the tier 5 is not as good. Yeah, you get a little bit of hidden damage, and yeah, you get a little bit more offhand shield strike chance, which is kind of cool. But outside of that, you really don't get a whole lot, especially when you compare it to the trees Kensai and Knight of the Chalice. Here with Knight of the Chalice, you could get a little bit of extra damage from the Vanguard. You could get the extra secondary shield bash chance. But Knight of the Chalice grants you +4 to hit and damage, and a stacking bonus to melee power, and 30 healing amplification, and a frontal melee cleave instant kill, and every time you Vorpal an outsider, you instantly stun them, which is way better. So as a result, this character ends up going tier 5 in the Knight of the Chalice tree and taking the Vanguard Capstone because the Vanguard Capstone is very strong. Now what this ends up doing is leaving you with basically no points to put into the Sacred Defender tree. And that's important. This character is not a Sacred Defender. You might have a shield and you might look like a tank, but you aren't one. Sure, you can bounce a couple hits because you have a shield, and yeah, you're going to be more durable than the two-handed fighter standing next to you, but your character is not the frontline, I'm going into R10 and tanking out a bunch of Doom Reapers sort of character. I've described this character in the past as an assassin, somebody who uses their charge to get into combat, use Stunning Shield to stun whatever target you're on, and then just execute it within 6 seconds. Pretty much properly geared, in an R10 scenario, you can kill anything you want in that 6 seconds, meaning that a Dangerous Reaper, a bad champion, a mini-boss, all of it's going to die, and that's what I like about the Vanguard. It's just so cool, and I love the way the abilities combo together. I mean, now I'm just going to start gushing, but I just love the visuals of Vanguard, and it just feels really good. Now, Paladin Vanguard's a little bit weird, something that people should know ahead of time. If you are going to play this build, you can't actually use Charisma to hit and damage with a shield. That's not how shields work. Unfortunately, strengths are the only way you can make shields scale. They only use strength, hit, and damage. And as a result, since you are a paladin, you want to start with strength and charisma. And so the character that I played, I was just like, okay, I'll play a Dragonborn and start with 20 strength and 20 charisma because I thought that was kind of funny. But I do have some builds in the description that are going to be a little bit more straightforward and not quite as risky as the one that I put together. That'll be a little bit better for you. So if you like the idea of being like a Divine Crusader charging across the battlefield, sword and shield in hand, shielding those who need assistance while also just stabbing your way through monsters and shield slamming your way through others, this build is for you. I mean, I've always liked the idea of playing as a Vanguard enemy. I mean, just consider the fact that why would you use, the 3.5, maybe 4 pound longsword in your left hand when you got a 20-pound piece of steel in the right? Just slam them. Now, if you're done listening to me and you're excited, frothing at the mouth, ready to play some Vanguard, I'm going to pass it over to me with the build. I love fighting monsters with the shield on. I just think it looks cool. I love the way the shield bash looks whenever I actually attack in the game, and my character gets that offhand shield bash. I like the sound effects. I like everything about it. And so I want to pass out that information to you and how you can build your own. Now again, this is going to be a bit of a skeleton character, so you don't have to be a Dragonborn. I just did it because I wanted to max out my strength and charisma. And you can get your stats much higher than this if you use the gear that will be linked below the full gear set. I just didn't have the patience to farm it out because I was like, I've got it to cap, and then in 2 days I'm reincarnating it. So I'm not going to spend 8 hours farming that nonsense out. But if you want to keep it at endgame, it can work very well for you. For now, you got strength, you got charisma. These are your most important stats. Strength is your damage because shields require strength to hit and damage. You can't get it any other way. And charisma is for divine might as well as all of your saving throws. So you kind of need both of these. And then, of course, you need constitution so you don't die. That's health and stamina. It affects your total hit points and fortitude saves. Now, your character is going to be relatively tanky. The build I have below will have closer to 250 physical resistance rating, which for a melee is pretty good, as well as a good amount of armor class from having a shield. Your skills don't matter. I have Intimidate and then some UMD and Heal. Again, these don't matter. I start with an 8 Intelligence. So if you just have Use Magic Device, you don't even really need Intimidate. I just had it as a backup. Again, not super necessary. As far as the feats go, Paladin's very straightforward. You need all the combat style feats for the shield mastery. I did go with Longsword on this build. You could technically go with Bastard Sword if you wanted, either by being part of the Helm like religion, and then you get Bastard Sword as a favorite weapon, or alternatively, you can take Bastard Sword out of Epic Destinies for Helm here. That's Solanas. I know what Helm looks like. This one. And get Bastard as a favorite weapon, so you can use it with all that stuff. I just didn't do that. If you were going to do that, you would have to take Bastard Sword proficiency with changes of your feats. So this build is not going to, but that is an option. I think if you want to do Bastard Sword, Fighter's the better choice for that, simply because you don't have to worry about all this favorite weapon nonsense, which saves you a whole lot of time. But we're using Longsword instead. So I grabbed the shield feats, also grabbed some of the martial feats. You've got improved critical, as well as precision, which is really important. And then I also took weapon focus slashing and power critical. The main reason I took power critical is because it stacks with this Purge the Wicked, so you get double the effect from it for bonus critical hit, damage, and confirmation. And this character deals a lot of critical damage, with several attacks bumping my critical multiplier up to ×6. So confirming those critical hits is really important, and all of that extra damage gets multiplied through many, many, many times. Night Training says temporarily acquired because you actually get it out of the Knight of the Chalice tree, so you don't actually have to take that feat. And then as far as epic feats go, I actually did take the Metamagic feat Quicken in epics just because I just don't like casting spells slow. It's not necessary, but there's nothing else to take at 24, so I just grabbed that. And then on top of that, I grabbed Overwhelming Critical, as well as Epic Damage Reduction here, because I felt like both those feats would serve me very well. And then for my Destiny feats, Double Strike, Embodiment of Law, Perfect Shield Mastery, and Deific Warding. The question between Deific Warding and the extra helplessness damage from Sense Weakness or Crush Weakness is an interesting question. It goes either way. I went with Deific Warding just because I wanted to be a little bit tankier, or you can use Crush Weakness for more damage. But these three are pretty much locked in because they're very, very good. As far as your spells go, take the good Paladin spells. Melee power, physical resistance rating, hit chance and damage, immunity to a lot of crowd control effects, death ward, 10% double strike, and competence bonus to critical threat range and multiplier. That's all you need. All the other feats, spells don't matter. There's lots of filler spells. I took, remove curse, Owl's wisdom. It doesn't matter. For enhancements, you're going to notice something very strange. I'm a Vanguard, but I don't use the tier 5 of the Vanguard tree. And that's because tier 5 of Vanguard is just way worse than Knight of the Chalice. Pretty much 1-to-1, everything is worse. Which is why we use Knight of the Chalice instead. Because this character not only gets to pick up extra smites, because you're smiting constantly, as well as Exalted Smite, which gives you a really strong frontal cleave, and that does a million amount of damage. But we've got Divine Might here, which gives the trance, so we're increasing the amount of damage that this character is going to be doing here by maxing out the Charisma, which is, again, where the Charisma is going to come in handy. You get 1 point in Divine Sacrifice, because it's just an attack that gives you +1 critical multi whenever you use it, and you take all this damage here. As it turns out, if you have a favorite weapon in your main hand, this +1 to attack and damage also applies to your shield, so it's very good. Then you're going to, as I said, pick up the defense, and of course, Ascendancy here, amazing damage, instant kill in terms of Holy Retribution, amazing, so all this stuff is really good. Whereas Vanguard, you just want to get the Capstone, because the Capstone gives you attack speed, it makes your shield stun 10% of the time, just for free, as well as double strike and more shield damage. Now you might be wondering, why Vanguard? Well, I'm going to show you right here. My sword is the Fellblade. This is the best longsword in the game. It's got 139 base damage rating. Wow, what a weapon. Now I have my shield with 303, because shields hit like trucks on steroids. This thing does so much damage individually. You really, like, every time this shield hit goes out, it's going to feel good. Now, of course, one of the things that matters a lot with a character like this is offhand shield bash chance. You'll notice I didn't take improved shield mastery, and that's because you can only shield bash a maximum of once per second. So with a 61% offhand shield bash chance, and I attack about 3 times a second, I'm always going to be getting those shield bash hits. So I don't really need more than this. So I didn't take improved shield bash the feat, and I didn't go tier 5 to get the extra shield bashing somewhere here. I think it's here, yeah, 10%. You don't need those things. You can take them, but you don't need them. Now, there is one thing, obviously there's going to be the comparison. How is Fighter Vanguard versus Paladin Vanguard? The main thing you're going to notice is that on Fighter, you also do the same thing, where you go tier 5 in Kensai, and not the tier 5 of Vanguard, because again, tier 5 of Vanguard, not that good. However, Paladin loses out on one thing. You gain an instant kill, and you gain Exalted Smite. Both very, very good. You lose Action Boost Haste. This build can't afford to get Action Boost Haste. It could if you drop either the tier 5 of Knight of the Chalice or the Vanguard Capstone, both things I didn't want to do. And you can get Action Boost Haste right here, which is like the highest melee damage effect in the game. So again, you kind of got to decide what it is you want more, one or the other. And I felt like this was more appropriate because Exalted Smite, for those of you that don't know, is an auto attack reset. And so what that means is I can attack Smite and it just goes an attack. So it's like a in between on the on like the what is it, attack speed bonuses. So again, it kind of gets there. But yeah, that's where I would spend it. And then I spent no points in any other trees, so we don't need to talk about it. And then we go with the Epic Destinies. Epic Destinies are fairly straightforward. Divine Crusader has the big shield thing to bring down Wrath, which makes it so your shield can double strike, which is cool. Gives you a bunch of damage. Also, with thanks to Embodiment of Law, you get Law of the Divine, which gives you an extra 12 d6s of law damage. Scales with melee power. Super duper strong. And a bunch of stats here. You will notice I didn't take the Epic Strike here, Consecrate. And the reason is because Consecration, while good, doesn't give me as much damage as I wanted on this character, and I figured that would be more important. Plus, while you would take Consecrate for the Crusade buff, I have like 1,000,000 smites, so I can just keep mashing them to get Mighty Crusade, which gives me extra smites to my entire raid, even if they're not standing next to me, which is pretty good, so it affects the ranged characters as well. Instead, I decided to go with Fatesinger because Sword Sings and Blade of Discord are a huge amount of damage, and also, because I'm using the Fell Blade, my critical strike chance with proper buffs is 14 to 20, and the Sword Sings, has it so if you critically strike, you stun a target, and this gives you an extra +2 critical threat range. So 12 to 20, I crit and stun, which means 40% of the time I stun with this attack, or 45% of the time. It's very good. I like having that. And then, of course, just the extra stun Blade of Discord here is nice. Less threat generation, and then also Rain just does a little bit of extra damage on the side. And then I went with Unyielding Sentinel. Now, I did this for 2 reasons. One, I needed a little bit more defense. I really like having Renewal, and I wanted to test out Into the Fray, because this is obviously good. 15% or 15 physical resistance rating and 6% double strike. Very good. Hit chance. You got the defense. There's a lot of good stuff in this tree. But how good is Into the Fray? This gives you physical, magical resistance rating, and damage at the beginning of combat. It's actually very good, and this goes off all the time. If I either had more points or if I wanted to take points out of Rain, I would take points out of Rain and put it into the Fray. It says it has a 10-second cooldown. You got to be out of combat. This does not seem to be the case. It goes off all the time when I don't think it should. So I have no idea how this ability works entirely, but it's active at the beginning of almost every single fight. Now, granted, fights can last longer than 5 seconds, but it's nice when you enter into combat that if you happen to be the first one into the room or you pull aggro accidentally, that extra physical magical resistance rating might protect you, which is more of where I was thinking of going with that. In theory, there is other options, like take the points out of Rain, get some more points or get some more Epic Destiny points. Maybe you go with the Hands of the Sentinel, you get the extra lay on hands, they regenerate. That's actually not a bad option. What I was thinking of doing, I just don't have the points for that. So it's kind of a cool option. It's like a side thing where you can just go, boom, lay on hand somebody, and you give them a huge bump in hit points. It's basically a tank saver, which is something to think about as an option. As far as gear goes, I'm not going to touch on too much of the stuff. I have most of the gear. I'm just missing a few pieces and some filigrees. So this character is running the Saltmarsh set, which I haven't ran actually any time on a character before, but I'm doing it because it gives artifact bonus to all ability scores, which is great because it needs strength, charisma, and constitution. And it gives physical and magical resistance rating, and it gives healing amplification, which is cool because then that coincides with all of the defensive or the offensive bonuses I get from the Hammer Fist, or not Hammer Fist, the part of the family set for all that extra damage. So for the Saltmarsh set, I got the Salt Iron Bracers, the Ethereal Ring, the Croco Boots here, the Amethyst Loop, and then the Sailcloth Cloak kind of coming together, giving all those extra stats. Then I just kind of jammed Titania's Glory because Crown of Summer is nice, and I didn't want to use a melee power augment. And the extra smites is great for this character because it just gives me more smites, which is really, really cool. If I had more time, I would say Lindell's Belt from the new raid is really nice, but I don't have Lindell's Belt, and you can't buy it with runes. You just have to get lucky. So I was like, wow, I'm not dealing with that. But it actually stacks with the extra smites from Titania's Glory, basically giving you infinite smites, which is kind of cool. And then finally, I have a craftable trinket here, which is kind of weird. Usually, you would use a Gem of Many Facets, and I actually do have a build that includes the Gem of Many Facets. I just don't have one, and the Gem of Many Facets is weird because it's level 30, so it caps out at level 30, so you can't craft it up to level 32. So I wanted level 32 stats on it, so I crafted this bad boy right here. And then the Fellblade is the best sword for this build. If you happen to have one, I would go for it. If you don't have a Fellblade, a Dinosaur Bone weapon is also good too. So a Dinosaur Bone longsword with a dust effect is probably what I would use. I just actually don't have the dinosaur bone materials because then it'll also affect the shield. And then of course the Ferro Crystal shield. It's the GOAT. It's the best shield you're gonna get for Vanguard. Go get one. It's really good. You're gonna want to use this. If you don't have one of these, you can consider the best defense from Ravenloft. Also a pretty good shield. If you don't have one of those, honestly, if you don't have either of those two, probably go with a more defensive shield. Legendary Shield of the Scorpion is going to do really well with its just all the extra defense you get, keeping you alive, which will also be pretty nice. Yeah, so that's the build. That's the character. So if you want to play Vanguard and smash people up like me, like I said, character feels pretty good. Damage is somewhere around like 21 to 22,000 damage per second, somewhere in that range. And with my current gear, I'm missing a bunch of filigrees and other things. I didn't cover filigree in the video, but it'll be in the description if you want to check it out in the actual build when you get there. So if I actually had the proper gear, I'd probably get that closer to like 25, maybe even pushing up to 30,000 DPS. But that would take some work I'm not willing to put into this character, so I'm not going to. So thank you for watching. If you had a fantastic time. If you liked what you saw, make sure you follow that like button, subscribe somewhere. I don't know where. I can't tell you. We'll be back next time with some more Dungeons & Dragons Online content, and it's going to be a good time. So eat your vegetables, and don't get lost in the woods or the forest. Bad places. And that's it.